Hi there, just to say this is a short snippet from this week's main episode, which was published on Wednesday as always. If you want the full episode, you can find it just below this one. Another assumption. There is a self. There is a self. So it's an interesting one. And this is a huge problem within science in general, is scientists often haven't done any spiritual work. And they simply believe that the self is a physical thing with a physical location, because that's the default human experience. So if you've not done spiritual work, it's unlikely you're going to realize that that's not the case. And you might ask, well, so what? Well, the thing is that the scientist is the one doing the science, apparently. So if they misunderstand the self, they're going to misunderstand everything that they're doing. And especially with something like neuroscience, where we're sort of studying the mechanisms of the self and the psychology and the mind and so on, right? But if we don't realize that the self is not a solid thing that you can locate anywhere, that changes the entire interpretation of everything that neuroscience is talking about. And if you ask, listen, it's interesting, because if you asked a neuroscientist, what is the self? They would probably go straight to a neuroscientific point of view, and the neuroscientific point of view would basically say that it's brain activity. So what does that mean? They themselves are basically saying that the self doesn't exist as an actual thing. They're saying that it's simply the result of brain activity, which in other words is to say that it's like a series of patterns. However, I would challenge you to meet a single neuroscientist that lives life with actual recognition of what the self is. Because you see that they're so lost in concepts that they don't realize that their own fucking neuroscience contradicts the idea of a self. Because it itself, even in its own flawed paradigm, would say something like, well, the self is just a result of brain activity. It's not actually a thing. But then ask the neuroscientist and, talk to them, and you'll realize that they don't, there's no embodiment of that whatsoever, because they don't realize the depth of it, because they're not engaged in spiritual work. You see, so one thing you'll notice in science is a lot of, scientists talk about all sorts of weird shit about the universe, and a quantum physicist will be able to tell you that, the world, like the world around you is 99.99999% empty space and all the rest of it. When you actually look at how they live their life, they don't live their life as though these things are true. They just live like everyone else, because there's an enormous difference between understanding something and regurgitating knowledge and actually embodying it, right? And it goes for the self. Let's go further into that, because knowledge is confused with wisdom in science. In other words, when wisdom is just basically seen as an accumulation of factual knowledge, and from the scientific point of view, that is literally what wisdom is. But as far as I'm concerned, that is not wisdom. That's simply conceptual. It's not direct. You've not really discovered anything for yourself. It's indirect. It's indirect. As soon as you use a label for something, it's indirect, right? And as soon as you have no direct experience of it, it's indirect. And that is not wisdom, you see? For example, right? Instead of doing science, what you could do is go do meditation for 10 years, do psychedelics, do a lot of contemplation, go and get some direct spiritual insight, and that will eventually tell you that there is no fixed self. You cannot find yourself as a permanent thing. It will eventually tell you there's nothing outside your direct experience. There's nothing outside your experience. Now that is insight, and that is wisdom, and that is embodied. That is That is wisdom, because it's a discovery that you have made through yourself, through your own process. Scientific knowledge is not wisdom in and of itself. It's wisdom when it becomes fully understood and fully applied and fully kind of grasped. But that, how often does that actually happen in science? Not very much. And scientists don't understand it. They just mistake accumulation of knowledge for wisdom, which is why we all like to parrot scientific knowledge, because it makes us seem smart or wise. And it's better than not knowing it, I suppose, or it can be, but it's not the same as wisdom. Wisdom is an earned thing, and it's something that you earn through your own faculties, your own questioning, your own discovery, your own experience. Scientific knowledge is not wisdom in and of itself. Hi there, just to say this is a short snippet from this week's main episode, which was published on Wednesday as always. If you want the full episode, you can find it just below this one.